Family betrayal can destroy even the strongest bonds when money enters the picture. My son and his wife taught me that lesson the hard way. The day I vanished from my own home without telling a soul was the hardest decision of my life. But when your child treats you like nothing more than a walking ATM, sometimes disappearing is your only option. My name is Loretta Jenkins. I'm 62 years old, a retired nurse who spent 35 years at Grady Memorial Hospital in Atlanta. For 3 decades, I held strangers' hands as they took their final breaths. I cleaned wounds, administered medication, and whispered comfort to those who had no one else. I was the person who showed up when everyone else had gone home. That same dedication extended to my family. When Walter, my husband of 28 years, died of a heart attack on our front porch one Sunday morning, I didn't crumble. I stood strong, planning his funeral, handling the insurance paperwork, and somehow finding the strength to comfort our son Derek, who was halfway through college at the time. "You've always been our rock," people would say, at church, at the grocery store, at community meetings. And I believed it. I wore that responsibility like a badge of honor. Walter and I had built a modest life. We saved carefully, paid off our mortgage early, and put away money for retirement. Nothing extravagant, just the security that comes from decades of careful planning and sacrifice. Those Saturday nights when we stayed home instead of going out, the vacations we never took, the secondhand furniture we carefully maintain instead of buying new. What I never anticipated was how quickly those decades of sacrifice could be threatened by the very people I loved most. I remember the exact moment everything changed. It was a Tuesday afternoon in April, and I was watering the azaleas Walter had planted along our front walkway. My phone buzzed in my pocket. The caller ID showed my daughter-in-law's name. That call would set in motion a chain of events that would force me to choose between my son's financial mistakes and my own survival. If you're wondering whether family obligations should include emptying your retirement account to cover someone else's bad decisions, my story might change how you think about love, loyalty, and learning when to walk away. Subscribe now to hear more stories about family relationships and the difficult choices we sometimes have to make. Also, download your ebook titled Suspense and Thriller Stories by clicking the link in the pinned comment. Derek was always the sun in my universe. After Walter died, he became my entire world, my only child, the boy who once made me Mother's Day cards with macaroni and glitter, who played trumpet in the high school band, who had Walter's smile and my stubbornness. But Derek had a gift and a curse, charm, the kind that made teachers give him extra chances, that made girls write him notes in high school, that made strangers trust him within minutes of meeting him. Walter used to say, that boy could sell ice to Eskimos, with equal parts pride and concern in his voice. College changed him. He started with business administration, then switched to marketing, then communications. "I'm finding myself, Ma," he'd say when I questioned the constant changes. His focus scattered like leaves in the wind, from one grand plan to another. A clothing line one semester, a party planning business the next, a tech startup after that. Each idea brilliant in theory, but abandoned before it took root. He just needs time, I told myself, transferring money to his account when his calls came late at night. He'll settle down eventually. Then, Tanya walked into his life. I remember the first time he brought her home. Her car, a sleek white Mercedes, looked out of place in our working-class neighborhood. She stepped out in stiletto heels that sunk slightly into our front lawn, wearing a dress that probably cost more than my monthly pension. Her handshake was firm, professional, like she was closing a business deal rather than meeting her boyfriend's mother. "It's nice to finally meet you, Mrs. Jenkins,"
she said, her eyes scanning our modest living room. I caught the slight arch of her eyebrow at the family photos on the wall, the furniture we'd had for 15 years, the crocheted blanket draped over the sofa. Tanya came from money. Her father owned a chain of dry cleaning businesses across the Southeast, and her mother was a hospital administrator. She had an MBA and worked in luxury real estate. She was beautiful, ambitious, and laser-focused. "She grounds me, Ma," he said later that night. "She's got plans for us." Their courtship was brief, 6 months from first date to engagement. The wedding planning consumed everything. What started as a reasonable ceremony ballooned into an extravaganza at one of Atlanta's most expensive venues. 200 guests, custom-made gown, 5-tier cake, horse-drawn carriage. "We're investing in our future," Tanya explained when I expressed concern about the cost. "These connections will pay off." I emptied a portion of my savings to contribute. Walter would have been furious, but I couldn't bear to see disappointment on Derek's face. When I handed him the check, Tanya was the one who took it, folding it neatly into her designer wallet. After the wedding, they moved into a townhouse in Buckhead, an exclusive neighborhood I felt uncomfortable visiting. Their social media showcased a perfect life, matching outfits at Falcons games, champagne brunches, vacations to Barbados. Derek landed a job at a marketing agency, while Tanya sold million-dollar properties. They looked happy, but the cracks appeared during Sunday dinners. The way Tanya checked her watch constantly, the tension in Derek's shoulders when she spoke, the hushed arguments in my kitchen when they thought I couldn't hear. "Your commission wasn't enough," she'd whisper harshly. "I'm trying," he'd respond, voice strained. "Try harder. This isn't what I signed up for." I pretended not to notice. I baked extra pies for them to take home, hugged Derek a little longer at the door, told myself every marriage has adjustment periods. Then, on a quiet Thursday afternoon, as I was tending to Walter's rose bushes, my phone rang. Tanya never called me directly. Something was wrong. "Loretta," she said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "We need to talk about your son." My gardening gloves were still on when I answered Tanya's call. Dirt clung to my fingers as I gripped the phone, listening to my daughter-in-law's cold, calculated voice explain how my son had ruined their lives. "It started small," Tanya said, her words precise as scalpels. "He met some guys through work, investors, he called them. They had this foolproof system for cryptocurrency trading." I closed my eyes, remembering the dinner 3 months earlier when Derek couldn't stop talking about digital currencies, how the future of money was changing, how people were becoming overnight millionaires, how you just needed to know the right moment to buy in. "I told him no," Tanya said. "I told him our money was for our future, for property investments we could actually touch. But your son," her voice hardened, "your son went behind my back." She explained how Derek had initially invested $10,000 from their joint savings. When that showed promising returns, he pulled in more: their entire emergency fund, a loan against his 401k, cash advances on credit cards. All told, he had sunk nearly $150,000 into what turned out to be an elaborate scheme. "But that's not even the worst part," Tanya said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "When the investment started looking shaky, he borrowed money from private lenders to try to recover his losses." "Private lenders?" My stomach nodded. "You mean banks?" "No, Loretta, not banks." The implication hung heavy in the air. "These are people who don't send polite letters when you miss payments. They charge 40% interest, and they've already come by our house twice. The total outstanding debt, $85,000. And since you're his mother," Tanya's voice shifted from angry to expectant, "we thought you should help clean up this mess." The audacity struck me like a physical blow. Excuse me? You own your house outright. You have retirement savings. This is your son we're talking about. My hands began to tremble. Tanya, this is a lot to process. I need to speak with Derek. He's too embarrassed to call you, but time is running out. These people want their money by the end of the month. I ended the call, promising to think about it, but sleep evaded me that night. I paced my bedroom, stopping at the dresser where Walter's reading glasses still lay in their case. What would you do? I whispered to his memory. I could almost hear his practical voice. You can't pour from an empty cup, Loretta. The next morning, Derek showed up at my doorstep. He looked thinner, his eyes ringed with dark circles, but his smile was the same, that charming, boyish grin that had gotten him out of trouble his entire life. Hey, Ma, he said, hugging me tightly. I told you called, Mal. We sat at the kitchen table where I'd helped him with homework, where we played cards on rainy days, where we'd cried together after Walter's funeral. Now he sat across from me, a grown man asking his retired mother to bail him out of a debt larger than what Walter and I had paid for our first house. It was supposed to be my big break. Everyone was making a fortune. I just wanted to provide for Tanya the way she deserves, the way Dad provided for you. I felt my resolve weakening as he spoke. He had Walter's eyes, those warm brown eyes that still appeared in my dreams. It's just a loan, Ma. Once I get back on my feet, I'll pay you every penny, with interest. Derek, I said slowly, when have you ever paid me back? The car loan for college? The rent money that one winter? The business startup costs? His face fell, the charm momentarily replaced by something darker, more desperate. These aren't nice people I owe money to. So you want me to empty my retirement savings, money my father and I worked decades for, to pay off criminals? They're not criminals, they're investors. And yes, I need your help. That's what family does. That's when I saw it. The entitlement in his eyes. The expectation that I would sacrifice my security for his mistakes, again, just like I always had. Who exactly did you borrow from, Derek? His eyes shifted away from mine. Just some guys Reggie from work knows. Names, Derek. You don't need to worry about the details, Ma. Just the money. I stood up from the table. I think you should leave. Ma, please. I need time to think. As I closed the door behind him, a realization settled over me like a heavy blanket. This wasn't just about money. This was about the man I had raised. Somewhere along the way, my love had transformed from nurturing to enabling. And now, at 62, I was faced with the most difficult parenting decision of my life. That night, I pulled out photo albums, tracing Derek's face from toddlerhood to manhood. Had I failed him by always being his safety net? Or would I fail him now by letting him face the consequences of his actions? The next morning, my phone buzzed with a text from Tanya. We're running out of time. Have you made your decision?
The days following Derek's visit turned into a psychological siege. Tanya became a constant presence in my life, calling, texting, even dropping by my house on her way to property showings. Always impeccably dressed, always with that smile that never reached her eyes. Loretta, she said during one unannounced visit, perched on my sofa like a bird of prey. I don't think you understand the gravity of the situation. These men have threatened us. Then go to the police, I suggested. Tanya laughed, a sharp sound devoid of humor. And tell them what? That Derek borrowed money from loan sharks to invest in crypto? That would destroy his career, our reputation. She leaned forward, her voice softening in a way that felt calculated. Look, we're family, and families protect each other, don't they? Your husband would have wanted you to help his only son.
The mention of Walter made my blood boil. Don't you dare use him against me. Walter taught Derek about consequences. Well, the consequence might be that you never see your son again if these people decide to make an example of him. The threat hung in the air between us. Before leaving, she placed her hand on my shoulder, her diamond ring catching the light. Just think about it. You have so much, and we need so little of it. Meanwhile, Derek's behavior grew erratic. Sometimes he'd call daily, his voice breaking as he described mysterious cars parked outside their townhouse. Other times, he'd go silent for a week, then reappear with wild claims about a new business opportunity that would solve everything. "I just need seed money, Ma," he'd plead. "This guy I met has connections in Dubai. We could triple the investment in 6 months." Each time I felt my heart breaking. My son was drowning, but throwing him my life savings would only teach him that mistakes had no consequences. 4 weeks into this ordeal, I received a letter that changed everything. It was from my mortgage company, a confirmation of an application for a home equity line of credit against my property, an application I had never submitted. My hands trembled as I dialed the mortgage company. "Yes, Mrs. Jenkins," the representative confirmed. "The application was submitted online using your credentials. We're waiting for final signature approval." I hung up. A cold fury replaced my confusion. Someone had attempted to take out a loan using my house as collateral. Someone who knew my personal information. Someone who had access to my accounts. I drove straight to Derek's townhouse, my tires screeching as I pulled into their manicured driveway. I pounded on their door until Derek opened it, his expression shifting from surprise to guilt when he saw my face. "Ma, how dare you?" I whispered, pushing past him into their marble-floored foyer where Tanya stood, arms crossed. "How dare you try to steal my house out from under me?" "Loretta, calm down," Tanya said, as if soothing an unruly child. "Don't tell me to calm down. You tried to take out a loan against my property." I thrust the letter toward them. "This is fraud. This is criminal." Derek paled. "Ma, we were desperate. We were going to tell you once what? Once the money was gone? Once I was homeless?" Tanya stepped forward, her composure never faltering. "We were exploring options. If you're going to be this dramatic about helping your own family, then maybe we needed to take matters into our own hands." I looked at my son, searching for any sign of the boy I raised. "Derek, do you realize what you've done?" He couldn't meet my eyes. Tanya placed her hand on his arm, a subtle gesture of control I'd seen countless times but never fully recognized. "This isn't just about money anymore," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "This is about trust, and you've broken mine completely." That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I took action. I changed every password to my accounts. I visited my bank first thing in the morning and placed alerts on all my financial information. I called my mortgage company and reported the fraudulent application. I even contacted a lawyer to understand my options. For the first time in my life, I was protecting myself from my own child. Their tactics escalated. Tanya called my closest friends, spinning stories about my mental confusion and paranoia. Derek left voicemails that veered between anger and tearful apologies. But the worst came during a Sunday visit when Tanya dropped a new manipulation. "You know, we've been talking about starting a family soon. Wouldn't you want to be part of your grandchildren's lives to see them grow up?" My cup froze halfway to my lips. "Are you threatening to keep my future grandchildren from me if I don't pay your debts?" Tanya smiled thinly. "I'm just saying families should stick together. And if we're not a family now, in times of trouble, then what are we?" The weeks blurred together. Each day brought new pressure, new guilt, new manipulation. I found myself jumping up phone calls, checking my windows at night, second-guessing every financial statement. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was psychological warfare. Then came the invitation to the annual neighborhood cookout I hosted every summer, a tradition Walter had started 20 years ago that I'd continued in his memory. I almost canceled it this year, but something in me refused to let Tanya and Derek take one more thing from me. The day arrived sunny and warm, my yard filled with neighbors, church friends, and family. I was flipping burgers when Derek and Tanya arrived, her in a white sundress that probably cost more than all the food I'd prepared, him carrying a bottle of champagne like this was a celebration. They mingled, laughing and charming everyone. Anyone watching would think we were the perfect family. No one could see the storm brewing beneath the surface. Halfway through the afternoon, as everyone gathered under the oak tree Walter had planted when we first moved in, Tanya clinked her glass for attention. My heart sunk as she stepped into the center of the crowd, her smile brighter than a knife's edge. "Everyone, I'd like to make a toast," she announced, her voice carrying across my backyard. "To family, and specifically to my mother-in-law, Loretta, who has always been so generous, and who we're thrilled to announce has agreed to help Derek and I with a significant investment opportunity because that's what real mothers do, isn't it? They sacrifice everything for their children's happiness." All eyes turned to me, waiting, expectant, unaware they were witnessing an ambush.
Time seemed to stop in my backyard as 30 pairs of eyes fixed on me. The sound of children playing faded, replaced by an expectant silence. Tanya stood there with her champagne glass raised, a triumphant smile on her lips, while Derek shifted uncomfortably beside her. My mind raced back to all the times I'd smoothed things over, all the moments I'd swallowed my pride to keep peace, all the years I'd enabled Derek's behavior because confrontation felt too painful. But not today. Not in Walter's backyard, under his oak tree, surrounded by people who had known us for decades. I slowly walked to the small karaoke setup we'd arranged for later. Picking up the microphone, I felt a strange calm settle over me. "Thank you, Tanya, for that announcement." My voice carried clearly across the yard. "I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. I have not agreed to any investment opportunity." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Tanya's smile froze. "In fact," I continued, my voice growing stronger, "I want to be perfectly clear about something. I raised my son to be responsible for his own actions, to stand on his own 2 feet, to face consequences." Derek's face flushed crimson. He took a step toward me, but I held up my hand. "My late husband Walter and I worked hard our entire lives. We saved. We sacrificed. We did without so we could build security for our future." I looked directly at Derek. Security that was never meant to be a bailout fund for reckless decisions. The guests stood motionless, caught in this uncomfortable family drama playing out before them. My oldest friend Eleanor gave me a small nod of encouragement. "So no, I will not be funding any investment opportunity. I will not be paying off any debts, and I will not be manipulated or guilted into financial decisions that threaten my well-being." Tanya's champagne glass lowered slowly, her eyes narrowed to slits. "Now," I said with finality, "who wants more potato salad?" The cookout continued with a strained politeness. Derek and Tanya left within 15 minutes, his arm gripping her elbow tightly as they walked to their car. I watched them drive away feeling both victorious and heartbroken. That victory was short-lived. My phone rang at 11:37 that night as I was getting ready for bed. Tanya's voice sliced through the receiver like a blade. "You embarrassed us today." No greeting, no preamble. "You humiliated us in front of everyone you know.
You tried to ambush me into a financial commitment in front of my friends. What did you expect? I expected a mother to care about her son's welfare. She dropped to a threatening whisper. You've made your choice, Loretta. Don't expect to be part of our lives moving forward. When you're old and alone, remember this moment. The line went dead. I sat on the edge of my bed, clutching the phone, feeling something inside me crack open. The weight of 30 years of motherhood, the sacrifices, the worry, the unconditional love, suddenly felt like chains rather than bonds. That night, I made the most radical decision of my life. By dawn, I had packed 2 suitcases. I withdrew my savings from the bank, not enough to pay Derek's debts, but enough to start over. I left my cell phone on the kitchen counter, wrote checks for my regular bills, and locked my house. The hardest part wasn't leaving my possessions behind. It was stepping away from the memories. Walter's garden, the height marks on the kitchen doorframe tracking Derek's growth, the dining room where we'd shared thousands of meals. But those memories had become tainted. They'd been weaponized against me, used to manipulate and control. The early morning bus to Savannah was nearly empty. I watched Atlanta's skyline fade through the window, tears streaming silently down my face. Not tears of regret, but of release. My closest friend from nursing school, Elaine, met me at the station. I had called her from a payphone, the only person I trusted with my plan. You did the right thing, she assured me as we drove to her modest home near the river. Her guest cottage became my sanctuary. A small, whitewashed building with blue shutters and a porch swing. So different from my Atlanta home, yet somehow exactly what my soul needed. Each morning I woke to the sound of birds rather than worry. Each evening I watched the sun set over the river rather than waiting for another demanding call. For the first time in decades, I existed solely for myself.
Back in Atlanta, my disappearance caused exactly the chaos you might expect. Elaine kept me informed through careful, coded emails from a new account I created. Derek had reported me missing after 3 days of unanswered calls. Police found my phone in a house with no signs of struggle, just absence. They questioned me, Elaine wrote. I told them you had mentioned visiting cousins, but I wasn't sure where. The detective seemed satisfied when I showed him our nursing school photos, proof we were truly old friends. I felt guilty about the police resources wasted on someone who wasn't actually missing, but not guilty enough to return. Not yet. I needed this distance, both physical and emotional, to rediscover myself. 6 weeks into my self-imposed exile, Elaine forwarded me a disturbing message. Men came looking for Derek at your house, not police. Your neighbor Gladys said they looked dangerous. They pounded on doors up and down the street asking questions. One had a neck tattoo. The other wore an expensive suit that didn't hide his rough demeanor. Gladys said they mentioned money. The loan sharks had come collecting. My heart seized with maternal worry, but I reminded myself, Derek was 34 years old. His choices had consequences. I maintained my distance, watching autumn settle over Savannah. I found part-time work at a small medical clinic, using my nursing skills without the emotional drain of a hospital. I made new friends who knew nothing of my past. I started painting, something I'd abandoned after college when life got too busy with marriage and motherhood. 3 months passed, then 4, then 5. Just when I had started to build a new rhythm to my days, a letter arrived. Elaine had forwarded it from my Atlanta address, her handwriting on the outer envelope, someone else's inside. Tanya's precise script stared up at me. My hands trembled as I opened it, prepared for more accusations and threats. Instead, I found something entirely unexpected. Raw honesty. Loretta,
You were right to leave. I am ashamed of how we treated you." She explained that after my disappearance, things had deteriorated rapidly. The lenders had indeed come looking for their money. When they couldn't find it, they'd placed increasing pressure on Derek. Under that pressure, he'd finally confessed the full truth to Tanya. The cryptocurrency scheme had just been the beginning. Derek had been gambling, first casually, then compulsively. Online poker, sports betting, casino trips disguised as work events. For years, he'd been living a double life, funding his addiction through increasingly desperate means. The $85,000 debt wasn't even half of it, Tanya wrote. He had taken out credit cards in my name. He had borrowed money from my parents under false pretenses. He had even sold some of my jewelry when I was out of town. The revelation had destroyed their marriage. Tanya had filed for divorce, left the townhouse, and was rebuilding her life. She was in therapy, working through the anger and betrayal. "I blamed you for so long," she admitted. "I thought your coddling had created his dependency. But I see now that I enabled him too, in different ways. My expectations, my materialistic demands, my ultimatums. We both contributed to the problem in our own ways." Her final paragraph contained something I never expected. An apology. "You deserved better from both of us. I am truly sorry for the pain I caused. I understand if you never want to hear from me again, but I needed you to know the truth." I sat on my porch swing for hours after reading her letter, watching boats drift down the river, feeling something close to forgiveness settle in my chest. 2 weeks later, another letter arrived. A plain white envelope with familiar handwriting that made my heart leap. Derek's. His letter wasn't polished like Tanya's. The paper bore smudges and crossouts. It began simply, "Ma, I don't know if you'll ever read this. I don't know if you're even okay. The police couldn't find you, but my heart tells me you left on purpose, and I understand why." He detailed his downfall after my departure, how the lenders had given him one last chance, which he'd squandered on a desperate gambling attempt to win it all back. How he lost his job when he started showing up late, distracted by his mounting problems. How Tanya had finally discovered his secret bank statements and confronted him. "I hit rock bottom," he wrote. "Tanya left. The townhouse went into foreclosure. I slept in my car for 2 weeks before Uncle Ray took me in." My brother-in-law, Walter's younger brother, had apparently offered Derek a spare room with one condition. He had to get help. "I've been in Gamblers Anonymous for 4 months now. I work at Ray's hardware store during the day. I'm seeing a counselor twice a week. For the first time in my life, I'm facing myself without excuses." The letter continued, each paragraph more honest than the last. No manipulation, no charm, just the raw truth of a man confronting the wreckage he created. "You don't expect my forgiveness, Ma. I don't even expect you to respond. I just need you to know I'm sorry. Not sorry I got caught. Sorry I hurt you. Sorry I betrayed your trust. Sorry I took advantage of your love for so many years." He ended with words that broke my heart and healed it simultaneously. "You did the right thing by leaving. It was the wake-up call I needed. I love you, Ma, and I hope one day I can deserve your love again." I folded the letter carefully and placed it in the small wooden box where I kept Walter's wedding ring. For the first time since leaving Atlanta, I allowed myself to cry fully, deep, body-shaking sobs that released years of pain and worry. The next morning, I looked at my calendar and made a decision. I had been gone for nearly a year. Perhaps it was time to go home. Spring had returned to Atlanta by the time my bus pulled into the station. The dogwoods were blooming, their white flowers catching the April sunlight. The city looked the same, but I wasn't. My house had remained untouched, protected by neighbors who collected mail and kept an eye on things. Everything was as I had left it, but it felt different now, like clothing that no longer quite fits. I took my time settling back in. I reacquainted myself with my garden, now overgrown but still Walter's creation. I reconnected with friends, carefully explaining my absence as a necessary break without too many details. I reclaimed my life on my own terms.
A week after my return, I called my brother-in-law, Ray. "He's still with me," Ray confirmed when I asked about Derek. "Working hard, staying clean, paying down his debts a little each month." "Does he know I'm back?" "No. Figured that was your news to share." I asked for Derek's work schedule. The following Tuesday, I drove to Ray's hardware store on the outskirts of town. Through the window, I could see my son stocking shelves, wearing a simple blue work shirt with Ray's hardware embroidered on the pocket. His hair was shorter, his face leaner, his movements deliberate rather than restless. The bell jingled as I pushed open the door. Derek turned, customer service smile ready on his lips. It froze when he saw me. "Ma?" The single syllable contained a universe of emotion. I stood there, handbag clutched in front of me like a shield. "Hello, Derek." He took a half step forward, then stopped, uncertainty written across his face. We stared at each other across the aisle, mother and son, separated by more than just shelves of paint supplies. "You came back," he said finally, his voice thick. "I did." "I'm sorry." The words tumbled out. "For everything. For the money, for Tanya, for trying to use your house, for—" I held up my hand, stopping the flood of apologies. "I got your letter." His shoulders slumped with relief. "You did? It's why I'm here." Ray appeared from the back room, assessed the situation with a quick glance, and mumbled something about taking his lunch break. The door jingled again as he left, leaving us alone in the store. Derek gestured toward a small seating area by the counter where customers could rest while mixing paint was completed. We sat awkwardly, like strangers on a first date. You look good," I said, noting the clear eyes, the steady hands. No designer clothes now, just clean jeans and work boots with a hint of paint spatter. "I feel better." He rubbed his palms on his knees. "One day at a time, they say in the program. Some days are harder than others." "I got Tanya's letter, too." He nodded. "She told me she might. We're civil now. Not friends, but not enemies either. She deserved better." "You both did," I said softly. "Better from each other, better from yourselves. And you deserved better from me." He looked directly at me. No charm, no manipulation, just honesty. "I don't know if I can ever make it right, but I'm trying to be someone you could be proud of again." The words hung between us, fragile as butterfly wings. "I was always proud of you, Derek. I just wasn't always honest with you, or with myself." I explained how my enabling had contributed to his problems, how my fear of losing his love had made me complicit in his irresponsibility, how sometimes the hardest kind of love is the kind that steps back and allows natural consequences to occur. I needed to disappear to find myself again, and maybe you needed me to disappear to find yourself too. We talked for 2 hours in that hardware store, more honestly than we ever had before, about Walter, about childhood, about addiction and recovery, about forgiveness. Not the easy kind that papers over problems, but the hard-earned kind that acknowledges harm and commits to change. When a customer finally interrupted us, Derek stood up, professional mask sliding back into place. "I get off at 6. Maybe, would you want to get dinner if you're not busy?" The hesitancy in his voice broke my heart. My confident, charming son, now humble enough to accept rejection. "I'd like that. I'll pick you up here." As I walked to my car, I felt lighter than I had in years. Not because everything was fixed. It wasn't. Derek still had debts to pay and trust to rebuild and recovery to maintain. I still had boundaries to enforce and my own life to reclaim. But for the first time, we were meeting as adults, not as enabler and enabled, not as banker and borrower, just mother and son, flawed and human, trying to do better. Sometimes the most profound love isn't about staying and fixing. It's about stepping back and allowing growth. It's about trusting that the pain of consequences can be more healing than the comfort of rescue.
Walter would have understood. In fact, I think he would have been proud.
Life gives us these crossroads, moments when we must choose between comfort and growth, between enabling and empowering. I chose to disappear when staying would have destroyed us both. It was the hardest decision I ever made, but also the most necessary. What about you? Have you ever had to walk away from someone you love because staying would only deepen their dependency? Have you struggled with the line between supporting and enabling? Subscribe to hear more stories about family relationships, difficult choices, and the courage it takes to say no when your heart is screaming yes. Your story matters too, and I love to hear it in the comments below. Because sometimes the bravest form of love looks like walking away. Not forever, not without hope, but with enough faith in someone's potential to let them find their own way back. Lastly, download your ebook titled Suspense and Thriller Stories by clicking the link in the pinned comment.